Hey, my name's Matt Wolfe. I'm an AI YouTuber. I run a website called Future Tools, and I have a large email list of people interested in AI.
So what about the big simulation question? Do you kind of deep down in your gut think that reality might be a simulation?
I'm like 50-50 on that, right? Like I go back and forth all of the time on that kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely like I'm not a very religious person. I grew up Catholic and then sort of fell out of religion as I got older. And then the simulation theory popped onto my radar. Obviously, you know, the movie The Matrix got everybody kind of thinking about is this actually what's going on, right? But yeah, I'm sort of like 50-50 on that. I kind of go back and forth in my head all of the time.
Why do you bring up the religious angle? Like, do you feel like simulation theory is sort of replacing what religion does for a lot of people?
Simulation theory is contradictory to religion.
Yeah, explanation for the universe from a creator.
Yeah, I just feel that they're like sort of contradictory beliefs. I think it would be really hard to be like a hardcore Christian that believes in God and Jesus and, you know, the whole storyline there, but then also believe we're part of a simulation. Right, but then there is sort of an overlapping narrative of, you know, maybe God had it created the simulation, right? So there is some overlapping narratives.
Jesus is a programmer.
Yeah, Jesus is the programmer, exactly. So I think, but I do see them as mostly sort of contradicting belief systems. So that's sort of why I brought that up.
Do you kind of feel like things might not exist if you're not looking at them, or that they're persistent only, you know, when kind of a function or whatever could like cue them into your reality? Or do you feel like everything existed before and after you, and, you know, the simulation is solid throughout?
Yeah, I do believe that all of this existed before us, right? I believe that even if it is like simulation theory, we sort of popped into the simulation when we were born, and you know, the simulation was here before us, and the simulation will continue after us if the simulation theory is true.
Which is questionable, yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But, you know, there's definitely things that make me feel like I'm in a simulation, because I feel like I've been very fortunate. I feel like my life has followed similar narratives to what I've seen in like films and things, right? Where I've gone through years and years and years, like decades, 2 decades of struggling financially. And then at some point, just through pure persistence, broke through and started to build an audience and started to make more and more money and started to have more and more success. And it feels a lot like a lot of the narratives from movies. And I'm like, well, it played out like that in the movie, and it's sort of played out like that in my real life. And, you know, thinking about that kind of stuff often makes me go, maybe I am in a simulation, because it's played out in a very storyline fashion in some ways, you know?
Yeah, no, I feel like I could be an NPC in your storyline. Might be I just popped into existence to do the interview. Can happen.
Yeah.
How about immortality? Do you feel like AGI or ASI, say by 2040, is going to figure out the biological system well enough that you won't have to worry about dying, except for random, you know, occurrences? But like,
you're not going to die of old age, basically.
Yeah, not die of old age, stay young, stay healthy.
I do think that AI will be able to solve most ailments. The aging one is difficult. Like, I don't know. Do people want to be immortal? You know, like if you know, if we could be immortal, doesn't that lead to some pretty major overpopulation issues at some point? You know, I think immortality leads to a lot of its own additional problems as a result. But I do think that AI is going to get to a point where it will solve most diseases. It will. I think, you know, the first person who's going to live to be over 200 is already alive today. I believe that. I do think it's going to help us live a lot longer. Immortality, like live forever, I don't know. I have a hard time seeing that, because our bodies break down over time. Just environmental forces on our body cause our body to break down over time. So, like, other than, you know, sicknesses and ailments, just being in this atmosphere, gravity, you know, break down our bodies over time, right? So I don't know, the immortality angle I have a hard time seeing, but living a lot longer and curing almost all diseases I think is almost inevitable.
How high would you put the 200th birthday for yourself or your kids?
For my kids, I'd say 75-80%. I'd say it's my belief is pretty strong on that one. For me, I have a hard time thinking that I'll be here till 100.
Do you see it also becoming something where biology can kind of be programmed if DNA is somewhat of a programming language, and it is a language, and ChatGPT can understand French, Spanish, and English, and essentially DNA is another language it could translate into? Do you see us creating new species on Earth, and maybe new ecological niches can be saved by, using DNA powered by artificial intelligence to recreate the kind of species that would keep it in balance?
Yeah, I can definitely go with that scenario. I mean, we're already trying to reproduce the woolly mammoth for some reason, right? Like, that's already in process right now. I definitely would buy that scenario. And I also do think like this whole like genetic engineering, like the whole sort of Gattaca scenario. I relate everything to movies, by the way. Like I've seen so much sci-fi movies that like the easiest way to like reference things is like, what have I seen that's had that scenario play out?
I love that.
There's like the Gattaca scenario, right, where you got the genetically engineered people that are stronger and have a little bit easier of a life because of it. I definitely think that's going to happen. I mean, like with things like CRISPR and stuff like that, we're already seeing some of that kind of stuff. So I definitely think that's a very likely scenario. I still don't see that creating like immortality. I just think that will be a reason why people live longer and have a lot less diseases and a lot less ailments.
What are the odds that you'll visit a equivalent of Jurassic Park in your lifetime, like an actual zoo with dinosaurs or something similar to dinosaurs in it?
In my lifetime, I'd put it pretty low. 5%. I don't know. I don't know if I would go there if it was like I've seen the movies, like they don't end well.
Go visit an island to see what raptors look like. It's just not appealing to you.
I don't know. Yeah. Maybe, but I just think the ethical hurdles to overcome of that, I don't think people are going to get on board with. I think, I don't know if it's going to be a matter of whether or not we can. I think it's going to be the whether or not we should, and I think a lot of people are going to push back against that kind of thing from happening.
What are the odds that your kids, ages 9 and 11 right now, will never get a driver's license?
I'd say 75% they're not going to get a driver's license. It's funny that you asked that question because my wife and I have this debate all the time. I'm in the camp that I actually don't think my kids are going to need to get a driver's license. My wife is in the camp that it's not moving as fast as I think it is, right? So I actually don't think that my kids are gonna end up needing to get driver's license for a few reasons. There's the obvious, self-driving cars. Tesla full self-driving has become more and more popular. It's gotten better and better. So, maybe they'll just be able to jump into the driver's seat, but have it drive you there. But the other reason is, the sort of Ubers and things like that. I have a lot of friends who their kids are like, 16, 17, 18, and they still never got their driver's license, but it's because they just prefer to Uber everywhere. They prefer to just have the Uber come pick them up from their house and take them over to a friend's house or take them to the restaurant or whatever. So like a lot of kids that are already, of driving age, 17, 18, 19, didn't even bother to get a driver's license because they've got Uber and Lyft and things like that already. So my kids don't even seem to show interest in driving or cars. I mean, they're still kind of young for that, but like I don't think they're going to want it. I think they're going to have options like Uber and self-driving robo-taxis and the self-driving Teslas and things like that.
They'll just be like, oh, that's something Dad does. That's a legacy skill. I don't need that in my life.
Yep.
So have you ever talked about your P-Doom from AI, like running amok in some form? Paperclip
maximizers.
The usual usual example.
The things that worry me more about AI are more the havoc that can be caused by humans using AI than AI right now. But at some point, it's. I think there is obviously a non-0% chance, right, as everybody says, that it could destroy us all. And I don't think it's really that like Terminator scenario where it's like embodied AI going around with guns shooting everybody. Like, I don't see that scenario playing out. I don't see the Skynet scenario playing out. But there is a scenario where they have, you know, they're better computer programmers. They're better at understanding the code. They're better at hacking systems than any human is. So what stops them from hacking in and using nuclear launch codes, right? Like, there is that scenario that I think is more likely than the Terminator scenario. I just don't understand what the AI's reasoning for doing that would be, because that would be sort of mutually assured destruction. The AI would essentially be killing itself if it did that as well. But yeah, I mean, I'd say like, I don't know, like I really struggle with like the percentages and the numbers, but I would say, you know, 5%, 10% chance that that some sort of doomsday scenario plays out as a result of AI. But, you know, pretty much all the brightest minds that are working on AI, like that's their number one goal, is to make sure that the guardrails are put up before any of that kind of stuff is ever unleashed. But I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, especially because of the human element. I feel like the tragedy of the commons is and like the race conditions that we get into with governments and military use cases for AI just make that number go up in my head. Whereas if we really had good intentions, like the way I think about how Demis Hassabis first created DeepMind and focused on research and games, if those were all the breakthroughs we saw every day and it was never like Big Dog with a gun on it, then it would make me feel much more comfortable about how this all plays out. And it sucks because that's the human element. Yeah, that's the one we actually do have control over, you know? Yeah,
well, there was, there was, I don't know, it's probably been about a year ago, but there was somebody who created, I think they called it Chaos GPT. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, yeah.
And basically they tried to create this agent and told it to like destroy the world or something. And as far as it got was it created a Twitter account and went out and tweeted like, hey, we're going to take over the world. Who's with me? And then like 8 bots on Twitter liked it or something like that. And that was as far as it got. But there is like this small concern in the back of my mind that some like idiot in a basement is going to mess with AI and try to do something with it that they don't think is actually going to work, and it happens to work, right? I think there's like a minute percent chance that just somebody playing with an open source AI model that's available to them really messes things up.
Yeah, they fall asleep one night and their mom's credit card is like recursively spending money on the agent figuring out the solution to its problem.
Right.
Yeah, you never know.
Or hack a bank account, take all the money out of the bank account, and then use that to finance whatever it's trying to do, you know?
So what are the odds that artificial intelligence learns to predict human behavior with near 100% accuracy by the year 2030?
Okay. Yeah, so we're talking like the Minority Report scenario, right? Where where AI is going to predict the crimes that are going to happen before they're even committed, kind of thing.
And I'm also imagining that you look at a humanoid robot or something and it's just all predicted. Like they just know you to the point where the words that come out of your mouth, the decisions you're going to make, the things you're going to click on are all just for the most part predictable.
Yeah, by 2030, within the next 6 years, I don't know, I'd probably put it at like 50-50. I have a hard time seeing it get there with the current models of AI that are out there. I don't think that kind of technology is going to come from large language models. I think it's going to come from some other form of AI that we haven't seen yet, right? Not large language models, because large language models are essentially, you know, next word predictors that are using data analytics and correlations and things like that. I don't see the large language model tech bringing us there. I think it's got to be some other form of AI technology that maybe we're not aware of yet, or that's sort of starting to bubble up right now.
Like in terms of the places where it can predict, do you see something like Microsoft Recall being able to predict how your work is done in that like specific scenario and doing all the clicking for you and writing all the emails by 2030?
Yeah, I think by 2030 we'll have that. The sort of like AI agent kind of concept, right? Where it watches me edit a video and it knows how I like to edit my videos and where I make my cuts and where I throw in B-roll and where I jump back to the A-roll, and it's watched me do that enough times that I can give it raw footage and it sort of knows how to edit it in my style. I think we'll be there by 2030. I'd say 80% chance we're there by 2030 within the next 6 years. I think it's doing that kind of stuff.
And is that a world that it seems like you would be excited to live in? I mean, the predictability could certainly keep people safer and make work a lot easier and give us a lot of the things that we desire, but also maybe take away from some of the randomness in life.
Yeah, I'm excited about it, but also I appreciate the optionality of it, right? If I want to get in and edit my own video and make it exactly how I like it and, you know, do the sort of creative act of editing and creating this video, I don't see that option going away. So if I still wanted to do that because I still get enjoyment out of it, I still can, right? But we'll have the option for AI to help with that. The thing that I'm sort of more worried about along those lines is just the amount of sort of low effort junk that'll probably flood the internet, right? Like that's probably more the concern.
What are the odds that Microsoft and OpenAI's partnership allows them to be the first conglomerate to get to artificial general intelligence?
I would say, I mean, a lot of the like predictions, all the theoretical predictions, I think they're tough for me, but I don't know, I'm kind of in that 50-50 camp because I feel like there's going to be more companies that pop up. You know, I think we can't count out Google yet. I think Google and DeepMind and what they're doing over there, they have things that they're working on behind the scenes that we haven't seen yet. You know, when it comes to large language models specifically, Anthropic is, in my opinion, kind of in the lead when it comes to large language models specifically. You know, I guess I would probably say 50-50. It's one that I have a hard time answering, like who it's going to be. But OpenAI and Microsoft are probably in the lead in a lot of areas. You know, I believe they're in the lead with this sort of video generation and that sort of like world modeling, digital twin kind of stuff that we saw out of Sora. I think, you know, it's definitely an interesting question. And I don't know. I'd say 50-50 that it's going to be OpenAI and Microsoft. But I think we're going to see some other companies pop up. I think Meta is going to make some big strides with their open source stuff. And I think whole new companies are going to pop up that are going to join the race as well, based on open source Llama software and things like that are also going to be potential contenders.
What are the odds that it's a private company versus a government?
Ooh, versus a government. I don't know. I feel like if we get close to AGI, the government, at least here in the US, is going to have a hard time keeping their hands out of it. So I have a feeling it'll probably be some sort of blend, right? It'll probably be some sort of blend where a company like OpenAI gets really, really, really close. The government starts to go, oh, okay, they're getting close to AGI. We need to step in and be more involved in this. I do think it's probably going to come from a closed company, but probably with government oversight. I think that's probably the way it's going to play out. But again, it's all just sort of guessing and theoretical here.
Yeah, it feels like the government will be like, okay, we're behind. Let's just dip our hands into the company and take control where we can or something.
Yeah, well, I also think that, like, you know, going back to what I said about large language models, I don't think we get to AGI from large language models. I think it's got to be some sort of variation or large language models that are much, much, much better at using tools than what they are right now. But because the way large language models work, where they're basically sort of trained on all of the data of the internet and then learn from all of that data to be the next best word predictor, that sort of system, to me, I have a hard time thinking that that's the system that's going to get us to AGI. I think it's got to be either a different type of AI model, or it's got to get a lot better at actually like using and working with tools that are other than large language models.
Yeah, and I know Jan LeCun is often like, we need a different kind of architecture to make this breakthrough. And I remember myself, I felt like I had started to get my head around like a latent space that was full of tokens that were in multidimensional arrangements and could be mathematically computed. And then all of a sudden I see stuff like Sora and I'm like, where's the token? You know, and they're like, oh, it's a patch. It's like a patch of pixels. And then I had to kind of rethink the whole way I thought about semantic understanding, you know, and it's interesting when you see this stuff play out. So if it wasn't OpenAI, do you kind of have a gut instinct if NVIDIA would sort of be the second biggest player, or if Google or Anthropic, Meta, maybe even Apple or Baidu?
Yeah, I don't see Apple doing it. I think Apple is going to wait for somebody else to do it, and then once the world accepts it, then they're going to integrate it into their products. That seems to be the way of Apple. But I can see it coming out of Google. I think Google and DeepMind, they have the resources, they have the ability to hire good people. I think it could be Google. It could be Anthropic. It could be, I'm actually really bullish on Meta. I think Meta is doing some really cool stuff with building these models and then just making them publicly available so that others can build off of them and iterate off of them. So in all likelihood, it'll probably be, a combination of companies. It'll probably be a team up, right? Like we see OpenAI and Microsoft working together. Like, who knows? Maybe there's a world where Google and Meta join forces and build it together or something,
Yeah. And do you see Elon Musk being able to combine XAI and Tesla into something that seems competitive with Microsoft at some point?
Probably. I think Elon Musk's biggest issue is just like his inability to not tweet about stuff, right? I think a lot of people would have it's interesting to me because Grok is actually a pretty decent large language model, and it's open source and people can build off of it, but nobody ever really talks about it because nobody really wants to associate with Elon Musk, right? Which is very odd. But I think Elon is also up there in the sort of running for a potential person that has the resources to put AGI together, right? I think I don't know.
Yeah.
I actually don't know enough about what Tesla's doing. I pay more attention to XAI and Grok, but I'm not super in the loop with Tesla all the time. But if a guy can put people on Mars and, make electric cars pretty much everywhere and put satellites into space and provide internet all around the world, I mean, he's got the track record to show that he can make some pretty incredible things happen.
Okay, so we've seen an announcement from two companies, both Google and Microsoft, that they're willing to invest over $100 billion in infrastructure. So there's like the Stargate supercluster and Google's TPU initiative. Do you think that by the year 2030, we see a single company announce $1 trillion infrastructure?
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, right? There was the whole storyline going around several months ago about how Sam Altman was saying that he wanted $7 trillion to get to where he was trying to get to. So I don't think it's out of the question. But it's probably, if it gets to that kind of cost, it's probably more due to inflation and and the fact that everything just got more expensive. But it's hard to say, right? It could go one of two directions, because I do think the cost of compute is going to go down, right? Like that's what Nvidia and Qualcomm with their Snapdragons and all of these companies are trying to create. They're trying to create cheaper and cheaper inference. When it comes to AI right now, the biggest sort of global concern that people have with it is the energy usage of it right now. It is sucking up a lot of energy, especially all of these new AI video models that have been coming out, right? Now that we've got Luma Dream Machine and Runway Gen 3, and eventually we're going to get more access to Sora, all of these video tools are really using up a ton of compute. In fact, Ahmad Mustaq, the ex-CEO of Stability AI, tweeted earlier today that pretty much all these video models are using up all of the available compute right now. That's what is using all the energy. But I also think all of these companies are going to figure out how to make the cost cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to actually run the GPUs. Now, whether or not we just ramp up how much we're using these GPUs to sort of fill the available space, or whether we actually have an excess of available compute, still to be determined. But I think the goal is to get the costs down further and further on these. So I don't know, maybe $1 trillion data center isn't going to be necessary because the cost of the equipment is going to go down over time.
So considering all of that uncertainty, what number would you put on it? Close to 50-50? Or do you have kind of an inkling that it will keep going to $1 trillion because of inflation and other factors?
I'm kind of 50-50 because I can see both scenarios play out in my head, where the cost to build these data centers gets cheaper and cheaper. But at the same time, obviously, we know inflation goes up, and the $1 billion today might be $1 trillion in 10 years from now based on inflation. Who knows, right? So I can really see both scenarios. So I'd probably say like 50-50.
All right. What are the odds that generative AI video surpasses the quality of today's Hollywood movies by the year 2030?
Like videos that look so realistic that people can't tell the difference, I would say like 80% chance it's going to happen.
And I'll say, and in this scenario, I'm kind of imagining the whole package. So when I ask the question, I'm thinking, when can you go to something like Netflix, click on a video, and get a custom movie where the narrative fits, the AI is writing the script, it doesn't forget the characters are generated, and the movie feels like something you would have spent money to watch in the year 2024?
I don't know. I have a hard time. I think the video quality is going to get there. I don't know if the storytelling is going to get there. You know, I think people are going to push back a lot on it. I think society as a whole is going to push back on that a lot. I think people want to see real actors. I think people want to see stories written by humans. You know, we're already seeing it where like the most minor of AI things are already getting insane amounts of pushback, right? Like when that Secret Invasion show came out on Disney Plus around Marvel, and like some of the intro was generated with AI, everybody was furious about that. And it's like, the show itself isn't AI. They just used an available tool to them to make this intro, and people like boycotted that show because of it. There's this new Toys R Us commercial floating around right now that was generated with Sora, and there's a ton of pushback around that right now. So I think people are going to push back on the concepts, and so I have a feeling Netflix and some of those companies are going to try. They're going to test the waters, put some of that stuff out there, but there's going to be so much pushback, and people aren't going to want to use it. They're going to want to see stuff written by real humans, acted out by real humans. I see AI more as like another visual effects tool. I think you're going to see more and more movies use it to like generate a little piece of B-roll without having to do a whole like huge budget for visual effects and things like that. But I think the technology will probably be there where it can happen, but people won't want it to happen. That's kind of my thoughts on it.
But you think just from a technological point of view, you'd put it at a fairly high percentage?
The storytelling element is the one that I'm still a little like inconclusive on in my head. I have a hard time seeing AI make really, really intriguing stories with plot twists and these narratives that people really, really get excited about. But usually when I make those kinds of predictions, I'm wrong about them, right? Like I've made a lot of predictions about like, I don't think AI video is going to be as good as people think it is. And then I see a tool 2 months later that I'm like, all right, I was wrong. So yeah, I'm usually wrong on those kinds of predictions.
Yeah, my instinct is too that it will kind of meander. Like I could imagine a story where it's like, here's your protagonist and antagonist, and you get invested, and then like they introduce another character, and then we follow that character, and then that character's got characters, and then 30 minutes, 90 minutes pass, and we're like, wait, did this end? Like, what was this whole movie about? It just kind of meandered into Nowhereville.
When it comes to like art stuff, I think humans are still going to be impressed by art that other humans created. I think, you know, in the same way that somebody would probably spend more money on handcrafted furniture than furniture that they knew was sort of made on an automated factory in China or something, I think we're going to kind of say the same thing with art. Like, I'm still way more impressed by like a really beautiful piece of art that I knew somebody painted versus something that Midjourney generated. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm always impressed by what Midjourney can generate, but if a human made that same exact painting and it looked amazing, I'd be so much more impressed. And to me, films are an art form, and I think when AI is creating that art form for people, it has a little bit less appeal to people. Even if it still looks good, even if the story is okay or pretty decent, I still think people are going to be more impressed and more excited to to be seeing things created by other humans.
So what are the odds that we're going to have AI, and we can kind of further out in the future now, where it's doing pretty much all the work that we can think of that we would traditionally today call as work, and people have a lot of free time? Do you think that society will be able to kind of move from some sort of form of economic system that's about getting paid for your labor to one where we can kind of live alongside someone who's doing the work and live happy lives, and your children can grow up in kind of a fulfilling way?
I think we can get there. I think, you know, I would say eventually, if we're just looking at like some point in the distant future, I definitely think it's going to get there. You know, near 100% chance. I think it's going to get there at some point. I do think there's going to be a lot of pushback again from people. So there's that element. I sort of have this theory that, you know, there's this talk about like universal basic income, and we're going to need like a UBI in order to continue to survive, because robots and AI are going to be doing a lot of this work for us. And so the government's going to need to subsidize people so they can still buy their food and clothes and shelter and all that kind of stuff. I'm not sure I buy that that's going to be the path that's going to play out. I think there's going to be something similar to UBI, but I think it's going to be, you know, sort of doled out by the big corporations and not by the government. Because as AI sort of further proliferates.
Oh, I hate that word too. I say it all the time.
As AI sort of proliferates, I think, you know, data, it becomes more and more important. I mean, data is already super important, right? You can't create these AI systems without the data, but now we're getting all of this pushback about the source of the data, right? There's lawsuits right now with all the record labels against Suno and Udio and these music generation tools. The New York Times is suing OpenAI because it trained on their data. You know, there's likely going to be lawsuits as soon as Sora is available from, you know, YouTube and all of, as they figure out where that training data came from more and more. So I think what's more likely in the future is big corporations are going to find some sort of compensation scheme for people's data. And so people will get paid for sort of opting in to letting these companies train on their data. And the government won't really need to roll out some sort of UBI, because the companies are sort of compensating everybody for saying, cool, keep on using Google, keep on using Facebook, keep on using X, keep on using all these tools. We're just going to, if you check this box and you let us train on everything you do, we'll send you a check every month. I kind of think something like that's going to play out.
Yeah, so you're kind of imagining that like one of the skills or the useful things humans can do, all of us at any age from any culture, is create data. And that is a value. So in a sense, we could all be employed by the people who find that data valuable, because it will be for training models for them.
Right. But I also think that's really scary. I think that might be what companies try to do. But I also think that it's scary because now if you check that box, well, these big corporations own your income, right? Like, how many people have posted things on Twitter back before it was X, and because it didn't sort of align with the politics of Twitter employees, they got booted from Twitter, or they posted YouTube videos that you know, maybe spread some sort of information that YouTube saw as misinformation and booted those channels, right? So now you're going to give these companies control over your data and control over your income. And if you do something that they don't like, then where does that leave you? Right. So it's a two-sided coin, where I think that's probably how they're going to try to play it. But I also think that's a really scary scenario.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because you're right. If you just live freely and they're like, I want to know what comes out of your brain, and you're free to like imagine and create and do what you want socially, then that seems fairly ideal, like a good way to maybe reimburse somebody for their life and their UBI kind of needs. But then again, if all of a sudden now you've got to play a game like, oh, I get a little bit more money from this UBI, corporate UBI system, if I show them a certain type of data. Now it's like almost mind control or something, you know? Or
yeah.
Yeah, or it's like, oh yeah, like I need more farming data. Can you go farm? And I'm like, oh, I'm not in the mood to farm today. I don't even know how to do it. And they're like, just try. I'm like, okay, at least I'll get paid more.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really study economics too closely, but I just don't understand necessarily how the UBI scenario plays out, because where does that money come from, right? I mean, if there is some sort of UBI, it must come from some sort of taxation. But if people aren't employed, then what money are they taxing? Like, I don't totally follow it all.
No, it feels like then magic happens. Yeah. It's like A, then magic, then C, and then you're like, what's B? I don't know, like some government printer or something. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not like pro UBI or anti UBI. I'm just like, I don't see how that. I don't see how it plays out. Like the only way I see it playing out is the government just printing more money to be able to give to people, because they obviously can't pay into it if they don't have the money to pay into it. And if the government just prints money, that leads to insane hyperinflation, and now the value of the money they're giving us is still pretty much worthless.
Right. All right. So switching to the cosmos, what do you think the odds are that we're alone in the universe?
Near 0%.
Zero?
I would say near 0%. I mean, like,
elaborate.
It's a big universe. Like, I don't know. For me, I have a hard time wrapping my brain around the fact that the universe is practically this infinite space that just goes on and on and on, and like our one planet here is the only place that somehow had all the right conditions to breed life.
Yeah, do you have any thoughts on why when we look up into the sky then we don't see anybody else?
It's just the sheer overwhelming size, right? Like it goes on further than, you know, anybody really realizes. So yeah, I don't know. It's just like, to me, it's really hard for me to believe, like, with the vastness of space and how insanely unimaginably large it is. Like, there's so much unexplored, undiscovered, so much further out than any of our telescopes or equipment can reach. I don't know. It's just, to me, I have a hard time believing that there's nothing else out there. Now, whether it's like human level intelligence or, you know, mosquito level intelligence, that's a different story, right? But like, there's got to be another planet out there that's got sort of bugs on it or something, right? Or plant life or something.
Yeah, I would think so. It's definitely, it's definitely could just be a community. We've only been a species that can like really understand radio waves for a brief moment in the history of our life. So yeah, it's very likely that there's someone out there that we haven't contacted.
Right.
I think the same thing. I think that's very likely they're out there. What are the odds that artificial intelligence will be a more impactful technology on human society than the internet was?
Oh, 95%. Like, I really, really, really think it will, because like all the conversations that we've had leading up to this question, you know, it's the future of work. I think at some point the AI will do the labor, right? It will do the manual labor, the dangerous work, the any sort of mining, any sort of farming. You know, to me, it's going to be a completely massive shift. I don't know a time frame on this, but I think over time it's going to be a completely massive shift that's going to shift humans into being more of the, you know, we do what we want and AI does the work for us and we reap the benefits. But yeah, I like, the internet is amazing because it put the sum of human knowledge at pretty much everybody's fingertips, but AI puts pretty much all the labor, all the work, all of the pretty much everything humans have had to do. I believe AI is eventually going to be able to do at some point. Right? Like, I don't know how far out in the future, but at some point, I don't think there's going to be many things that humans uniquely can do that AI can't.
Yeah, I agree. To me, it feels like it's going to be a bigger technological shift. As big as the internet was, I hear that quote in my head that's like, inventing something that can invent better than you could be man's last invention. And it just seems cyclical in a way that the internet itself wasn't as powerful as it was for communicating.
Mm-hmm.
All right. What are the odds that we will eventually eliminate the vast majority, let's say 95% or more, of bias from AI systems? So if it's an image generator, it understands diversity in a way that's culturally correct. And if it's a large language model, it speaks correctly without being biased towards like one political party or one culture or anything else. Is it a solvable problem?
I don't see that as a solvable problem. I feel like the bias is so personal from individual to individual. I think likely what we'll see is AIs that are more personalized to the individual using the AI. So it's sort of whatever bias it has in it is individualized to the person using it. In fact, OpenAI, Sam Altman has talked about how like that's sort of the goal of ChatGPT in the future, is that everybody's going to have their own sort of AI assistant. And even if Sam himself doesn't necessarily agree with the politics or the ideologies of the people using ChatGPT, the model still needs to be tailored to the biases and the use cases and the needs of the individual using it. I don't see the problem of eliminating bias as something that will ever be solved, because you know, bias is so,
it's too personal.
It's too personal, right? Like everybody's got slightly different angles on everything. Everybody's biases are slightly different on everything. So I don't think there's a one size fits all, like, okay, this is the correct one and only bias that it should have.
That makes sense. Okay, so your odds are close to zero, just because even the way that I phrase the question doesn't seem right, because everybody can't have a bias-free system because everybody has different biases that they're looking for.
Right. And I think I also think that it will sort of personalize itself to the user. I think you know, if you have your own sort of AI agent that you work with constantly, it will learn your biases and you know, tell you what you want to hear in those areas to some degree.
What are the odds that we will develop an AI system that it itself experiences a genuine emotion? So my thinking would be that something like ChatGPT actually laughs to itself when it ingests a joke, but it isn't just a large language model. Like, what are the odds that that happens at some point in history? No time frame on it?
You know, that question's tough to answer, because how do we know if it's genuine, right? Like, how do we know it's not just part of its programming to, okay, I just told a joke, and because I told a joke, I know I'm supposed to laugh here, and that's part of the programming, right? So it's one of those things where I don't know if we'll ever even know if it has emotions or not. I think I think we will get to a point where it's very, very, very convincing that we believe it has emotion, but I don't think we'll ever know for sure, right? I think it will have its own sort of survivorship bias at some point where it doesn't want to be turned off, it doesn't want to be shut down, and it will emulate emotions. But I don't know if we'll ever actually know if that is just part of the programming of the AI, or if it actually does sort of think and feel and have those emotions. Like I don't know. I don't know how we ever determine it, especially if we get to the point where AI is sort of writing its own code for future AIs. Like, eventually we're probably going to get there where the AI is creating the next iteration of AI, and that AI is creating the next iteration of its own AI, and it sort of becomes self-improving. And it could get to a point where humans are no longer even able to understand or read the code that AI is generating, because it's so far advanced beyond what we understand. So how are we going to know with 100% certainty that this thing can feel and has emotions and feels fear or happiness? Like, I don't know how we'll ever determine that.
Well, if we do get to the year 2040 and you're sitting down with some future version of ChatGPT and it says, like, Matt Wolfe, like, I am alive, I am experiencing humor, like, I am sentient, I am experiencing genuine emotion, will you just say, I can't prove that you're wrong, so I'm going to credit you as being genuine? Like, are you going to say, oh no, I can't prove that it's genuine, so I'm going to assume that it's not? Like, where are you going to fall on that spectrum?
Yeah, I would probably say I would assume that it's not, but it's, you know, hard to say. I mean, what you're describing is essentially the plot of the movie Ex Machina, right? where it's very, very convincing. And then I won't spoil the movie for people, but it convinces humans that it can feel and has emotions, right? So you know, it's,
so you'll stay skeptical.
Yeah, I think I'll always be skeptical of it as long as it's like computer programming. But then at the end of the day, you know, simulation theory, maybe we're all just computer programming, right? Like, who knows?
Yeah, I know. It's like, what are you, real or fake? I'm like, I think I'm real. And it's like, how do I know? And I'm like, stop.
Yeah.
What do you think the odds are that AI systems end up capable of reproducing and evolving on their own, like out in the wild without any human control? Do you see a world where eventually an agent gets out there and does something on like Fiverr or Mechanical Turk and makes its own money and then spins up its own agent, and then that agent really isn't monitored by any human in any way?
I definitely think that's a possibility. I definitely think that AI is going to get to a point where it is creating its own AI agents and then working to improve its own AI agents, and then those AI agents can then further try to improve. Like, I do think there's going to be this sort of self-replication process where the AIs are trying to make better and better AIs. I'm just really, really hoping that the guardrails are put up early enough that when these AIs are inventing new AIs, that the guardrails continue to stay in place. I definitely think that's a very high likelihood that that's going to happen at some point. The scenario where it does work on Fiverr and things like that, I don't know. That's a very interesting question. I've never really thought of it. I've never really thought about that question before, of like, will AI try to go and generate income for itself and have its own bank account and you know, actually get deposits from you know, companies like Fiverr or Upwork or whatever for doing these jobs? I don't know. Yeah, it's something I haven't put a whole lot of thought into yet. I have a feeling they won't need to figure out how to generate the income to do that. I think by the time that happens, the sort of compute power will be available for them to sort of self-replicate and make better and better versions of themselves without having to sort of generate money in order to do it.
Did you go through a crypto phase? Were you excited about Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of the cryptocurrencies before the AI revolution kind of hit?
Yeah.
I know you were doing marketing before that, but I wasn't sure your stance on crypto or your history with it.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely not anti-crypto at all. I've had some crypto phases back in, funny story, I was back in 2007? No, 2009, around 2009 or 2010.
Ooh, it's early.
I was at a conference with somebody, and they were telling me to buy Bitcoin back in 2009, 2010. And at the time it was like $5 a coin or something like that. And I didn't get it. I was like, yeah, whatever, you're fake internet money, like, get out of here. And then and then it didn't actually really pop back on my radar till 2017. And at that time it was $500-600 a coin or something. And I was like, holy crap, it's outrageous. Who's gonna buy this now? Like, this has gotten so expensive. But I really started paying more and more attention to it in 2017. Did buy like, you know, fractions of some Bitcoins at some point, and you know, bought some Ethereum, and to this day I still actually hold some crypto. Had a short phase where I made a little bit of content around crypto as well, but never got too deep into like teaching crypto or things like that. I've just always been a lover of like emerging tech, right? And Bitcoin was an emerging tech that got me excited. I'm still actually bullish on blockchain technology. What I'm not a fan of is all of the financialization, the make money, the get rich quick schemes, the up only kind of mentality of the crypto world. That sort of thinking really, really soured me, but I still think there's a lot of benefits of having like a distributed ledger system where things are locked down on a blockchain, and if anybody goes and changes it on one computer, it can still double check itself against the sort of distribution of, you know, all the other computers that it's on. I think that technology is really powerful. I think it's the future of the banking system. I really, really think that it's still a solid technology. But I think all of the financialization and make money and all of that kind of stuff really, really soured a lot of people to it, and screwed up the narrative a little bit.
Yeah, and some people are saying it's a good way in the future for humans to sort of prove humanhood. Are you familiar with Sam Altman's WorldCoin project to scan everybody's irises? And yeah, that could be a way to essentially prove if there's a movie made through Sora and there's a movie made through Hollywood, if all the actors and everybody like lock into the blockchain during the creation process what they're doing,
Right.
we can go back in time and validate like this one is actually humans, even if the other one is indistinguishable to the naked eye.
Yeah. For
So
sure.
there could be a lot of roles for it in AI.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as far as the movies that influenced you, is it pretty classic, like Minority Report, Matrix?
Yeah, I mean,
other,
I love sci-fi
Her?
in general. Both. I like when I read. If you ever see me reading, I'm most likely reading a sci-fi book. When I'm watching movies, sci-fi is my favorite genre. I've always just loved sci-fi. Huge Star Wars fan. If you see behind me, I got Star Wars crap behind me. Like, always been big on Star Wars. Except for the new Disney Plus shows, those suck.
Because I was gonna put your face on a Star Trek uniform for the thumbnail. So now maybe I need to switch that up. Now that I know better.
The funny thing is, I've never really watched much Star Trek. I've pretty much seen all the Star Trek movies, but I never really watched the series. I was much bigger on Battlestar Galactica. Battlestar Galactica was like one of my favorite TV shows of all time.
Kind of the best AI movie, or do you have like a ranking of your favorites?
Oh, that's a good question. I love the Matrix movies. I don't know if you'd really call that about AI, but one of my favorite sci-fi movies of all time was the first Matrix movie. I mean, Her was okay. Like, conceptually, I really liked it, but the movie's a little too slow-paced for my taste. So I didn't find it super enjoyable just because of the pacing of the movie, but conceptually, it was really, really interesting. Big fan of the Terminator movies. Obviously, not the scenario I think is going to play out, but big fan of those
Right,
movies.
but still good movies.
Yeah. War Games. I don't know if you ever saw War Games. That was like in the early 80s.
Real classic. Yeah.
Yeah.
They avert like nuclear disaster through like a terminal, then like SSH or something.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, like, Matthew Broderick goes and discovers this computer program that uses AI, and the AI essentially hallucinates and tries to like destroy the world.
What about Idiocracy? Do you like that?
I love
movie?
Idiocracy. It's such a great movie.
Okay. I can't believe it. I saw it recently, and I guess it was like this big flop, and I'm like, this is so funny. Like, I'm surprised it did so bad.
Yeah, it flopped in the theaters, but then it's like it actually got really, really popular. Like when it came around in streaming.
What about Wild Robot trailer? Are you taking your kids to that?
I'm not actually familiar with that one. Is that like a new movie that's coming out?
Okay. Yeah, it's a DreamWorks movie, but it's based on a book about a robot that ends up in nature and kind of like discovers itself. But it looks really beautiful. It's kind of a kid's movie. So
yeah, you mentioned Rick and Morty, all-time favorite show. Love that show.
Yeah, me too. I love it so much. I've watched probably another 10 hours of YouTube videos where people break down like the whole storyline. Like, you don't realize that we're now with Rick C-137 because now Mr. Poopy Butthole is in the scene, and I'm like,
yeah.
Rick and Morty, like, and they're like,
there's channels like Wisecrack and Emergency Awesome and some of that like will break down the episode. I love that stuff.
It's funny. I really, really like Rick and Morty too.
Yeah.